Hey guys, what's up? It is Public back with another video, and today we're going to be looking at another video around the Covenant system and the Covenant abilities, but this time I'm actually going to focus on not necessarily Shadow specific, but actually the multi-spec or multi-role problem with the Covenant system, alright? Let's talk about it. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the Covenant system definitely has some pitfalls, right? Fortunately for Shadow Priest specifically, the system overall seems somewhat balanced. I'll explain that in kind of a second. So basically, if you look at all four covenants, each one has 3 soulbinds, right? And each one kind of leads down a path of, okay, this one might be good early on the expansion, this one might be better once you get higher levels of renown, which is the reputation that you get kind of on a weekly basis for that covenant, or maybe this one's better for like an off-spec or tanking or healing or something like that, right? Which is kind of how that works. And each covenant has one that's distinctly fitting into that category. Now, what's important there is because of that and because of the way the conduit system works, what that actually means from a Shadow Priest perspective is, between all of them, if you're Night Fae versus Necrolord in like a raid setting, the difference in your damage is actually only going to be about, a few percent, maybe 1 to 5%, depending on the given scenario. And, more or less, can you be in melee with the range of the boss, depending on your covenant ability, that kind of stuff. But as a whole, things are actually reasonably balanced. The only kind of problem is which soulbind you're using when, right? So if you think about this in like a black box environment, this is actually quite straightforward, right? If all you do is play Shadow, you're going to be fine, right? Because you have access to 3 soulbinds that you can slot out however you want, right? Maybe I use this one for raiding, this one for PvP, this one for Mythic Plus, okay? Should be okay. Now, the problem with that, let's continue on the scenario if you're just a Shadow Priest, is I'm making an assumption here, and this is probably not valid for all classes and specs in the game. Right now it seems to be okay for Shadow, but it could change, is that, well, let's say Soulbind A is the best Soulbind for raiding, but for Mythic Plus, you actually do want to swap out a Conduit, or maybe this power is actually better, and you actually need to change that Soulbind. Well, right now you can't do that because the Conduit has a cooldown on when you can swap them out, right? So if you want, Mind Devour and Rapid Shadows for raiding, and maybe you want something else for Mythic Plus, you have to wait a week every time you want to swap that out and back and forth, which just isn't workable, right? So the problem there is, okay, then you're going to go with Soulbind B instead. And be like, okay, I'll use this Soulbind for raiding and this one for Mythic Plus. Okay, now we're shifting up the equation, because if you compare that to another Shadow Priest that actually favors Mythic Plus instead, he's actually potentially going to be doing up to 10 to 15% more damage than you, because he's main spec focused into that Mythic Plus content, right? And this is a very, very big problem, right? So if I've socketed a certain soulbind for raiding, and that's also the best one for Mythic Plus, I have to make a decision on which one I'm going to use that for. Is it going to be a raiding soulbind? Is it going to be a Mythic Plus soulbind? And then I have to use potentially a significantly inferior soulbind for that other role I want to do, right? This problem is very, very similar if you are, say, a main spec DPS player but wants to also heal on occasion, or maybe the opposite. The same problem comes to mind, right? So if we go Kyrian specifically real quick, Pelagos right now looks like a very strong soulbind for Shadow, especially when you have high levels of renown. The problem with that, though, is if Pelagos is also the best soulbind for, say, Discipline or Holy, you're going to have to make a choice, right? Do you want to optimize that soulbind and put conduits in there for Shadow, or do you want to do that for your off-spec, right? And the problem is, if you don't pick Shadow and instead you go with maybe Clea or Forge Light Mechanicos instead, you could be losing upwards of 10 or 15% damage because of that soulbind's balancing, right? The soulbinds in and of itself, they're not actually balanced between each other. What they did was they balanced them across covenants, but that doesn't protect you against if you want to do a different role, if you want to do a raid build and a Mythic Plus build, if you want to heal or DPS. There's no protection for that at all right now, which is just honestly terrible. Like it's like they almost don't even want you to multi-spec. And the bigger problem with this is it's actually going to be easier to maintain an alt to do an alternative role than do that with your main character, right? Because if that alt just says, oh, well, I can use that soulbind for what I want to, which in this case is maybe Mythic Plus, and I leave my main for raiding, that's fine. It's going to work out just fine. You're going to be better off doing that, even if you're a little bit behind on gear, right? 10, 15% is a big deal. Now, sure, they could balance this, but this is going to be tough, right? They now not only have to balance all of the soulbinds within each other against all the other covenants, but then also with themselves, and it's kind of a mess because they're trying to make it a catch-all system, right? We all have the same soulbinds, regardless of your class, regardless of your spec. We all have the same covenants, right? There's no changes there. So because they've decided there's no loadouts here, right? Like each soulbind is slightly unique inside of the covenant, right? And it doesn't change if you go from disc to shadow to holy. We have a very big problem in our hands, right? So I wanted to bring this to light because I know a lot of you guys have expressed interest of like, hey, what covenant should I pick if I want to heal and do DPS? Well, I can give you a recommendation maybe from the shadow perspective. The problem is you're going to be gutting yourself right now if you decide to off-spec, right? If you want to multi-roll, if you want to multi-spec or do Mythic Plus and rating, you're going to be at a disadvantage compared to someone that has swapped that around differently. And maybe that's okay. It is an RPG. Personally, I don't like this at all. I would rather be able to choose between the best raid build, the best Mythic Plus build, and the best PvP build. But I can't do that, right? That's just not a thing. And unfortunately, that really stinks. So I'm going to make a post about this on the forums because I really hope that they change this. If at the very least, giving us loadouts based on the spec, right? So if you're disc, you can swap your conduits freely for, once every week. But if you go shadow, you also can swap in those conduits freely to basically level the playing field a little bit here. Until they change anything, multi-specking is going to suck in Shadowlands, right? You're better off playing an alt and doing that role instead. So fingers crossed they change something. I want to make this video to bring awareness to this issue because not a lot of people are talking about it. And guys, real quick before I end off this video, I do want to give a quick shout out to my Patreons. I did start up a Patreon page. I wanted to get a bit better about what content you guys want to see me make and interact a bit better with you guys. I was kind of just making stuff kind of randomly, but I wanted to get a better way to kind of make the things that people want to see and really focus on those things, right? Between all the sim work and everything else, it's hard to keep up with Twitter and YouTube and all this good stuff. So hopefully this will help things out and I'll make the right content for you guys. Nothing is changing with my stuff. Everything will still be free and open to the public, whether it's my sims or the videos. It's just I want to get a little bit better focused on what you guys want to see. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all the great support you guys have given me over the last couple months. I really, really appreciate it. All right. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching.